Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. If there's one thing that we all know about President Joe Biden, it's that he is one tough hombre. He's a man who doesn't shrink from a fight on the world stage. Stone Cold Joe. He is not a wilting flower like Trump, who turned tail from dictators and autocrats like Vladimir Putin. No, Joe is a regular John Wayne, a dirty Harry to foreign and domestic enemies alike. Make any false moves and you're liable to get run out of town or worse. After Vladimir Putin stole our election and attacked our democracy, according to Biden, this is what Stone Cold Joe had to say.
Putin authorized operations during the election to denigrate you, support President Trump, undermine our elections, divide our society. What price must he pay?
He will pay a price. We had a long talk, he and I. I know him relatively well. And the conversation started off, I said, I know you and you know me. If I establish this occurred, then be prepared.
So you know Vladimir Putin. You think he's a killer?
Mm-hmm. I do.
So what price must he pay?
The price he's going to pay, well, you'll see shortly.
Mm-hmm. That's right. The price he's going to pay, says Joe. Well, you'll see shortly. We can only imagine how scary those words were to the former KGB agent turned autocrat, always autocrat, commie, Vladimir Putin. And that is to say, probably not very. But that's Joe Biden's foreign policy in a nutshell. It's the opposite of speak softly and carry a big stick. So for President Biden, it's talk big and carry a toothpick. Now, as for the price that Putin would pay for supposedly attacking our democracy, cyber hacking our oil infrastructure, maybe even meat industry too, well, Biden decided to give Vladimir Putin a natural gas windfall worth billions of dollars. And I bet Putin didn't see that move coming. Actually, yes, he did. Yes, the Biden administration approved Nord Stream 2 pipeline. It's the gas pipeline that would allow Russia to circumvent Ukraine and allow for Germany's energy needs, going right under the Baltic, right to Germany, make Russia super rich on top of it. Now, remember, Joe Biden did this after he shuttered our own gas pipe, actually our own, after Keystone XL, that was oil pipeline. And then, of course, we had thousands of Americans that were put out of work as a result of that. But see, I thought that Joe Biden was tough on Putin. So he goes after and nixes Keystone XL on the first day. And remember, this is after the Obama-Biden administration, wherein under former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who should have actually taken this through Congress, as you are supposed to do whenever you enter into any kind of agreement with a foreign entity, the Uranium One sale. Remember that? That was the majority of our uranium production capacity that they went ahead and allowed Russia to have. Biden is not really tough, right? And in fact, having the Keystone XL pipeline, losing that's kind of tough on American workers and the American energy sector, right? I mean, never mind that Biden's clearly playing 4D chess while Putin is playing tiddlywinks. At least that's what the media would like for you to believe. Now, Nord Stream 2, this pipeline also allows, as I said, Putin to cut off and isolate Ukraine. Yes, Ukraine. Ukraine's an ally, and this is a piece that Putin's been moving troops towards for the past few weeks. This is an elaborate game of chess. Putin has his eyes on he wants to take over Ukraine. He wants to be able to have that seaport. Ukraine used to, and they still, well, right now until they kind of are, I mean, the 95% completion of Nord Stream 2, the original pipeline went through Ukraine, and they were a transit country, and they were able to get Russian gas to Germany. And Ukraine, in exchange for providing this gas and being a transit country, they get about $3 billion annually. But now, Russia, they're going to shut down Nord Stream 1 altogether, cutting off that money to Ukraine. They're going to have it for themselves. Now, a couple of things here. Sidebar. First off, there's been a big misinformation campaign that Russia has been perpetuating against the first pipeline, saying that it's just not serviced well, that it's falling apart, it's dangerous. If people really care about the environment, they won't actually use it. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff. Forget about the fact that the second pipeline's coming from Russia, so it's the same dirty gas, but whatever. But this whole thing with going around Ukraine, you can stop there, going around Ukraine and cutting them off, that was a shield that Ukraine had as a defense against increased Russian aggression. And that was the entire purpose of NATO, by the way. Germany is a NATO member. NATO was established after World War II to take a stance against Russia. And so now, apparently, this president, our current administration, thinks that it would be wise to allow Germany to be reliant upon Russian gas and bypass Ukraine. So that's the thing. I mean, Germany is shutting down the rest of their nuclear plants. In fact, I think that they have like 2 or 3 that are expected to close in 2022. They're going to become solely dependent on Russia for energy. And the Biden administration thinks that this is a good idea, and they don't have any problem with it. But I thought Putin was a killer, and I thought Biden was a tough guy, and he was going to stand up to Putin. Remember, I mean, that's what Joe Biden told George Stephanopoulos, that he was going to tell Putin that he was going to make him pay, and he's going to let him know how at some point. We don't know when. I have to admit, we're getting kind of confused here, especially with the media narratives. I mean, is this Stone Cold Joe? Is it Waffling Joe? Like, let's go back to Angela Merkel and NATO for a moment. So remember when America, for years, paid for NATO? You remember all of this, right? They paid for NATO instead of asking Germany and some of these other nations to just pay the bare minimum towards this investment in their own self-defense. So who was it that actually made Germany live up to that agreement? That's right. It was Donald Trump. Donald Trump squared up to not just Angela Merkel, but also Vladimir Putin. Love him or hate him, he did it, and that's inarguable. Germany was finally prevailed upon to pay their fair share. I know that's a phrase that the left loves. And although we can't really figure out why, since Trump is supposedly constantly selling America out to foreign leaders like Putin, according to the Fourth Estate, right? So Trump was somehow portrayed as being weak and mean and a bully for standing up to Germany on paying their fair share for as a NATO country and opposing the Russian Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which he put sanctions on the companies involved and got the construction shut down. But Biden is apparently tough for doing neither of these things. No, in fact, sidebar, Biden jumped in and immediately placated Angela Merkel, undid everything that Trump had done. Right? In fact, it actually shocked some Democrats who thought that Biden was just going to continue that smart foreign policy at the very least. But no, that didn't happen. In fact, we're kind of struggling to follow this narrative of this particular spaghetti western starring Joe Biden. I mean, in any case, President Biden's failing to make good on his tough talk, and that hasn't stopped our press from playing up this tough guy mystique. This is the one thing I keep seeing all over the internet. In fact, right now, Biden's in Europe. He's in Cornwall for G7. Later, he's expected to meet in Geneva on June 16th with Vladimir Putin. Now, the Wall Street Journal said this of Biden's hard-nosed defense of democracy against autocrats and dictators around the world. They write, and I quote, "After leaving the White House in 2017, Joe Biden became increasingly concerned that democracies around the world, including the United States, were at risk. So he teamed up with NATO's former Secretary General to sound alarms about the threat of autocracies. And as president, Biden has been consumed by proving that the democratic system can compete against rising autocracies like China." After a February call with Xi Jinping, he instructed his aides to make the competition between democracies and autocracies a key theme of his presidency, saying, quote, "What democracies have to prove is that we can still deliver, and deliver in a way that people will feel it in their lives." That's what Biden said, according to advisor Mike Donnellan. End quote. Yes, Biden's a battle-hardened champion of democracy, apparently, so much so that the first thing he does is shut down America's Keystone Pipeline and then gives his blessing to Putin's Nord Stream 2. But, of course, you can count on the media to spin the fact that the president, he already conceded. He's already folded. He blessed the sweetheart pipeline deal for Putin. I guess when he goes over there to Geneva, he's just going to have Putin thank him in person. Listen to this quote from Forbes. The article says that the Western world had every reason to expect that the new Biden administration would impose tough new sanctions on Nord Stream 2. After all, Biden publicly declared Nord Stream 2 a, direct quote from him, bad deal for Europe. And this was after the Stephanopoulos question of is Putin a killer. The article continues, Forbes, nearly everyone's surprised the Biden administration announced on May 19th that it was waiving Nord Stream 2 sanctions despite the fact that a strong bipartisan Senate majority supports new sanctions, end quote. So Forbes was making sense until this part when they explained why Biden went soft on Putin and then blessed Nord Stream 2. Because of Trump, of course. Forbes says, and I quote, Biden's stated rationale for clearing the way for the completion of Nord Stream 2 is Trump. As president, he damaged the Washington-Berlin relations by criticizing Germany harshly for not meeting its commitments to NATO. Hence, the United States should repair relations with their most important ally, really, by supporting Angela Merkel through the Nord Stream 2 deal before she leaves office in September, end quote. So Joe Biden blesses Nord Stream 2, gives Putin billions of dollars a year, makes Germany a NATO country, member of an organization specifically created after World War II to stand against Russia, dependent on Russian energy provided by a killer, quote unquote killer, who Joe says stole our election. Come on. I mean, I understand that this is a Forbes editorialist, but if that wasn't dishonest enough, here's Politico chiming in for this sycophantic narrative, writing, "It won't be the pair's first time face to face." Okay, I feel like we should have some like theatrical music for this. What's this? Okay. They go on to say, quote, "They saw each other 10 years ago when Biden was vice president. He claims to have then told Putin he didn't think the Russian had a soul. The upcoming June 16th summit in Geneva is unlikely to be a particularly friendly affair, but U.S. officials and their allies outside the administration say there's no avoiding dealing with the Kremlin. No matter how distasteful it is to sit down with a man Biden once agreed was a killer. Biden will see Putin after holding multiple summits with America's European allies, saying we are standing united to address Russia's challenges to European security, starting with its aggression in Ukraine." This from a column that Biden wrote for the Washington Post, end quote. Now, you have to wonder with Politico here if they ever thought that they would write a puff piece like this. It's like the entire legacy media has become Pravda, basically a PR firm for the Biden administration. That's not a free press. That's not what you go to J school for. You don't go to J school to write fictional tales, making Biden out to be some sort of foreign policy gunslinger, when in fact he can't even win a showdown with a teleprompter. No, the president is anything but a tough guy who stands up to autocrats. In fact, he's kind of a bumbling career politician with a mean streak. He's about as tough as a newborn kitten, right? I mean, Biden doesn't believe that Putin's a killer. Or if he does, he doesn't really plan on doing anything about it. I mean, his rhetoric doesn't match his action. He's already rewarding Putin. He did that day one. In fact, he did it when he was still vice president by talking tough and letting the Fourth Estate write puff pieces about this really non-existent foreign policy. I mean, think about it. Since Joe Biden has become president, Hamas decided it would be a fine time to stage a full-scale attack on Israel, and China goes right on bullying Taiwan, and the United States and isn't making Beijing, not even really having any super harsh rhetoric for the pandemic that it likely caused, crippling the American economy and supposedly killing about, I think that what is the statistic now? Hundreds of thousands of Americans. And Russia, our geopolitical enemy, a mortal enemy, according to Democrats, they get a shiny new gas pipeline and fill their coffers with billions and billions and billions of euros. And remember all of those cyber attacks on America that you keep hearing about? Well, the White House tells us that Russia is behind them. So is Joe tough on this issue? Remember when they said that it was Russians that actually hacked Democrat DNC emails and then they would not allow the FBI to investigate even though they were certain it was Russia? Why not? No, the president says that the cyber attacks that shut down Colonial Pipeline was a private sector issue and not the government's business. Imagine Jefferson saying that about the Barbary Pirates. And now Russian hackers appear to have gone after our largest meat provider. So what will Joe Biden give that killer Putin this time in return for his crimes? Maybe Alaska. How about more uranium production capacity? Oh wait, Hillary Clinton already did that when she was Secretary of State when he was vice president. No, Biden's soft on autocrats because he is one. He endorses their tactics. Think about this for a moment. I mentioned this on my radio program today. ProPublica, which is a left-leaning media entity, decided that they were going to take data that was given to them and they were going to immediately write stories about it and try to shame wealthy people that live in the United States. Take private tax information, which, by the way, it's a felony to share that information, and write stories in which they can elicit envy from the public at large as a way to manipulate voters into supporting Marxist income redistribution through the ridiculous tax hikes that Biden's getting ready or wants to push through Congress and would love to implement over the United States. The $6 trillion plus of new spending with no offset, and that's all coming through tax hikes. This is a guy who is empowering the IRS, hiring thousands of more IRS agents, investing in them was the phrase directly from the American Families Plan that I wrote about at Substack at Chapter and Verse. Yes, and then ProPublica gets this information that it is illegal to share. This is a felony. They write stories about it, hinting that they have even more information. They refuse to give any answer as to who gave it to them, when they received it, how much they received. That sounds like a Stasi tactic. And in fact, it's not actually surprising because here you have Joe Biden that greenlit Nord Stream 2, the CEO and the guy who makes all the decisions about it, who is literally a former Stasi agent, Matthias Warnig, who is BFFs with Vladimir Putin. And yeah, now you get the idea. I mean, these are their tactics. It's really hard to say that you're against autocracy when you and your party act like autocrats in the first place. And that's just ProPublica. That's not even getting into the messaging and using tech entities and platforms as agents of state to suppress discussion, even questions about things like hydroxychloroquine or invectormin or any of these other therapeutics as it relates to the coronavirus. In fact, one of the things that came out of those Fauci emails was the discussion between Mark Zuckerberg and Anthony Fauci about how this was going to be handled on Facebook. Remember, people were suspended on Facebook for even so much as talking about hydroxychloroquine. But now there was a study that came out today via Washington Examiner that discusses how now hydroxychloroquine is actually super effective. Maybe you would have known that if autocrats hadn't been punishing you, silencing you, and removing you from the digital public square because they were trying to suppress all of this information. For some reason, we're left to speculate about their worst intentions because they are so unbelievably not transparent. Yeah, it's really difficult to take a stand against autocracy when you're an autocrat. But yet, who's the stooge again? Doesn't seem like it was Trump. No, this is about expanding the power of the state. And after Biden called Putin a killer, by the way, this is what Putin said back. I have to show you this. He said, "I remember when I was young and I got into fights with my friends. We used to always say that whoever calls names is called that himself, and that's not just a children's joke. The meaning is quite deep, psychologically. We always see our own qualities in another person and think that he, she is like ourselves. And coming from that, evaluate his, her actions and evaluate him, her overall." Putin added, "It takes one to know one," end quote. Seems like he doesn't think that he and Biden are all that different. Just a couple of autocrats intent on seizing more power and more power and more power through more and more government. Finally, it's not what you say, Mr. President, or what is written by the legacy media that makes a president's foreign policy tough. It's what you do and the results that you get. Autocrats and dictators like Vladimir Putin, President Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un, short stacked down there in North Korea, they are unimpressed by this Yosemite Sam Act. It's, what's the saying? All hat, no cattle? That's what they say here in Texas and in Colorado, I think, too. So, in fact, our geopolitical enemies know that you're more like them than not, and you're only emboldening them. The surest way to get a killer, autocrat gunslinger to challenge you to a fight is to talk tough, but actually be weak and have no intention of following through. And that's how you embolden foreign enemies who smell the weakness, and they'll exploit it. And it's not tough to act like Biden is on the world stage and he's, it's foolish, it's arrogant, it's dangerous. And honestly, this is one of the reasons why enemies are growing more emboldened and the world is growing more unstable by the day. Up next, we'll continue this conversation with Congressman Brian Mast from Florida. He also has some thoughts about Biden's ideas of having a woke military. Keep it here. If we've learned one thing recently, it's that the unthinkable can happen at any moment. And the best way to ensure that you make it through whatever unpreparedness is to be prepared. And you can do that with an emergency stockpile of food from My Patriot Supply. They are America's preparedness leader, and they give millions of people peace of mind for an uncertain future. But don't wait until it's too late. Act now before there's a stock market crash or more civil unrest or a natural disaster or worse. My Patriot Supply has served millions of families for over a decade, earning 39,000 4- and 5-star reviews. Their food is specially packaged to stay fresh and delicious for 25 years. And unlike the other emergency foods out there, each meal provides 2,000 calories when you need them the most. And if you act today, you'll save 25% on their 4-week emergency food kit. So just visit preparewiththefirst.com to save 25% on a valuable 4-week kit. That's preparewiththefirst.com. So we have a president who talks tough on the world stage, and meanwhile, he's busy softening up the military with some wokery. Congressman Brian Mast of Florida joins us to give his thoughts on all of this. Congressman Mast, good to have you with us today.
Good to be with you today.
I know you've spoken about this quite a bit, but it's considering that here the president's in Cornwall for G7. He's going to be meeting on June 16th with Vladimir Putin. And I keep seeing comparisons to Russian military ads and Chinese military ads. And then we have cartoons that are talking about the United States military and feelings and thoughts. And that's all well and good, but that's not really what the military was designed to do. And it seems like it not only puts us at a disadvantage on the world stage with regards to national security, but it also puts us at a disadvantage when we look at our actual troops. Because if we're focusing not on military preparedness and we're looking at emotions and feelings and thoughts and identities, then where's the preparation? What's your take on all this?
I think you pretty much hit all of the points, and it goes back further than this. The military fundamentally is every part of culture that the left hates. It is a gun culture, number one. Number two, it is a culture of moral absolutes. And number three, in America, it's the last bastion of true competitiveness, where you go in there, it's the best man, best woman. The only thing that matters that you identify with is excellence. You can be all you can be, but you can't be whatever it is that you choose to identify to be. That doesn't work in the same way in the military. And any minority status that you might identify with, that's not going to get you anywhere. And that is fundamentally what they hate. And that's why they have to try to bring in this wokeness into the military, to try to say there's some level, some grain of inherent inequality there. And if you're not recognizing that, then you're the one that's in the wrong. And that doesn't lead to preparedness. It doesn't lead to I guess I would paint it again to what they fundamentally hate, which is barrel-chested freedom fighters. To them, it's their definition of toxic masculinity.
Yeah, toxic masculinity, which has helped keep United States freedom preserved for, since the United States was created. It was that toxic masculinity there when we were talking about Normandy just, in D-Day just a few days ago, talking with Congressman Brian Mast. This, it also really doesn't, I don't think it strikes fear in the heart of our geopolitical enemies. Like, I don't really see Xi Jinping seeing some of these ads and feeling like maybe he should be less froggy towards Taiwan, or Vladimir Putin seeing some of these. I mean, this is a guy who photoshops pictures of himself shirtless, and he does ride a horse, but he also created some story where he was hunting up in the Siberian forest, and there happened to be, Congressman, just a random gaggle of reporters up there that he saved by punching a puma. And I'm not making this up. This is how their propaganda obviously works. That kind of stuff, these people aren't going to see these ads and have fear struck into their hearts, are they?
No, I mean, I think if you look at what our path of diplomacy is going to be, I'd say we're probably about maybe 30 days off from the new Secretary of State Blinken showing up into Moscow with a red reset button like Hillary Clinton. I think that's the kind of thing that we can expect out of this administration, a reset of that. They like to talk tough against autocracies, but in the end, they're so vividly fearful of them, whether it's Xi Jinping or whether it's Putin or others. They're looking for these constant ways to try and show that they're not going to be as tough on them as President Trump. And, let us go on apology tour number 2, like what President Obama did, and say, we're sorry for what President Trump did. He was wrong in this way, or this way. And we're going to genuflect in front of you to try and make up for that. And that's the kind of foreign policy that we're seeing out of them.
Now, Congressman, you mentioned something super important, that reset. It feels like there has been a reset, not just in terms, obviously, of foreign policy between the way President Trump handled things and the way that the Biden administration handles things. But when Biden was on the campaign trail, and even after he got into office and you had Secretary Blinken, it seemed that they had a very different tune on Nord Stream 2. Blinken had said that didn't look like it was going to happen. Biden said there's no way this is going to happen. It's dangerous. Now here we are. Keystone XL nixed the first day he's in office. Now Nord Stream 2, something that's overseen by a literal, actual former Stasi agent, that's been greenlit. They're going to circumvent Ukraine, destabilize NATO by compromising a member country like Germany. And all the while, he's acting like he's going to go over President Biden when he meets with Putin in Geneva, and he's going to tough talk. Is he just going to get an apology or a thank you from Putin in person? That's what I mean, what changed? What changed from, do you think, in your opinion, the campaign from Biden saying this pipeline's not going to happen to, not only is it going to happen, we're going to get this done here real quick, and then we're going to go over, and I just don't see any kind of advantage for the United States for this.
What changed is just simply he's the wrong mentality. We've all known that since everybody was referring to him as Uncle Joe. If you were to pick one person to say, I want to go and have that person help negotiate buying a home or buying a car, would you pick President Trump or would you pick Joe Biden? I think in the end, you understand where you would get the better deal on something like that. And it doesn't change when you're rising to the level of geo-national negotiations for things that matter to the entire world stage. We have somebody that's going to talk tough, but in the end is so fearful of anybody being offended, whether it be domestically or internationally, whether it's forcing them to live up to the promises that they made, like President Trump asked NATO countries to do, like the American service members are holding up their end on the battlefield and protecting those former Soviet bloc countries that never want to be behind the Iron Curtain again, saying, you do your part. But he's so frightened of offending them in any kind of way. We got to handle them with little kid gloves, or else we might somehow lose a friend. And they just fundamentally have the wrong mentality to even be in this game.
I love that perspective, Congressman, that you just said, because that point is not made often enough, that it's American servicemen and women who are there in these formerly Eastern Bloc countries making sure that that Iron Curtain never comes down again. And when Trump squared up to Putin and even to Angela Merkel, who was kind of tantrumatic about this, saying that you guys need to kind of pay just the bare minimum toward your own self-defense, then you're right. Biden came in and placated her, reversed all of Trump's policies and decisions on that. And so now I guess Germany's now back to getting a free ride, cheap, dirty Russian gas. And does anyone honestly think in that administration or elsewhere in NATO, and this is why you had tweeted a piece too about the Ukrainian President Zelensky saying that Biden originally offered him direct signals that they were going to block the pipeline, then that changed. Zelensky told the United States that you just gave Russia an unbelievable weapon, was his quote. Does anyone honestly think that Germany is going to fully commit to something because they're reliant upon the nation state that NATO was completely, literally created to stand against after World War II?
Of course not. This is just Germany becoming another one on the list of saying, hey, here's a way that we can take advantage of the United States of America. Just like China, just like Russia, just like others, Germany's looking at this and saying, man, we can get the United States to pay for our protection against Russia as a NATO ally and still just partner with Russia on anything that we want because it benefits us, but we're still going to they're going to have their cake and eat it too. That's the idea of the way all of these countries look at playing against the United States of America, because they know they're going to get away with it. They didn't get away with it under President Trump. That's what caused so many ripples across the world stage was because all of a sudden everybody had to say, whoa, holy crap, this guy isn't the same. He's not letting us just walk all over them the way the last people did. What are we going to do now? Somebody's going to actually, pull the curtain behind Oz and see what's really going on here. And everybody that's making a dollar off of it, because in the end, that's one of the easiest ways to figure out what's going on. You just ask the question, follow the dollars and see where somebody's getting paid. And in the end, I think you can see where a lot of these players are.
Yeah, well, at least we have nice tweets, right? I don't know. I kind of like the mean tweets. I like different world leaders thinking, if the guy tweets this, what is he going to do to us if we get too close to that red line? Last question for you, Congressman. And we appreciate your time with us today. Looking in domestically, all these headlines about inflation, everybody's looking at rising cost of a lot of things. We keep hearing that, oh, by fall, it's going to go back to normal. Not if Joe Biden gets his wish with this tax hike. I'm curious as to what you and your colleagues in the House are planning to do to stop this. I know it's kind of tough with Democrat majority, but I also know that there's some Democrats that are very, very nervous about all of these tax hikes coming so soon before 2022. Your thoughts on Republican strategy to fight this?
Look, let's be blunt about this. The fact of the matter is, Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, Harris, they do not care what it is that we believe. They will work to roll us in every single way that they can. And here's why they love inflation. Because any sort of generational wealth, that's exactly what falls under there's being some kind of inequality. So if you're leaving something to your kids, you're setting them ahead. That's creating a level of inequality, a social justice problem. So if they can tax your wealth away through estate tax, through capital gains tax, or even easier, if they can inflate anything that you saved away, then to them, they're righting a wrong that's going on in the world right now. And they're happy to inflate anything that you put away. They're happy to inflate that away. So I think the fact is you're not seeing the tail end of what's going on in inflation. You're going to see a rapid increase of this. It's not just the $6 trillion that they're proposing on infrastructure. That's just what they're proposing in the middle of 2021. Wait till we get to the end of 2021 and beyond and into 22, and you'll see it again and again and again. They don't care because it meets their agenda of getting rid of what they consider to be some kind of perceived inequality because somebody else's family saved for their family for a rainy day.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that Marxist word salad and those tax hikes and that legislation, those plans that they proposed. Congressman, great talking with you. We'd love to talk with you again. Congressman Brian Mast of Florida. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
All the best.
Up next, we have Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson of North Carolina. You don't want to miss it. Stay with us. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company serving premium coffee to people who love America. Veteran CEO and founder Evan Hafer spent over 7 years on the ground overseas with U.S. Special Forces and as a CIA contractor. Black Rifle Coffee is committed to Evan's mission of supporting veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. So this summer, Black Rifle Coffee Company invites you to enjoy your coffee. And by that, they don't just mean the awesome taste of it. Wherever you go to drink it, whatever you drink it for, just enjoy your coffee. I like mine black and bitter like my soul. And it can be served alongside your, whatever breakfast you want, or whether you just want to go out, crack open a can of 300 and go out in backcountry. Black Rifle Coffee is here to fuel your way wherever the summer takes you. So head to blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV to order yours. Use code DanaTV at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Fuel your summer with America's coffee. Black Rifle Coffee. We've been talking a lot about critical race theory, how it's entering our schools, and it's masquerading as being something academic when it is not. Now, my next guest, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson of North Carolina. First off, I have to say, not only is he talking about this issue, but I think everybody got to know the Lieutenant Governor, and I love calling him that. I'd like to have some other titles we'd like to call him. Maybe, if he runs for, even higher office. But everybody got to know him in 2018 when he had one of the most epic speeches ever. In 2018, when he was talking about the Second Amendment to City Council and in Greensboro City Council. Now, he launched his campaign for Lieutenant Governor in July 2019. He just delivered another amazing speech when he was speaking at the annual GOP convention, very fiery. And he said that the president's administration was turning the United States into a, quote, socialist hellhole, which I don't disagree with him at all. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson of North Carolina joins me now. Lieutenant Governor, it is a pleasure to have you. I think when I saw you, when we met, I think we were in Atlanta. Where were we? We were in Paducah? I think we were in Paducah when I met you.
I think we were in Indiana.
So.
Indiana.
Okay, well, maybe it was in Indiana. All right. Well, it was there. It's so good to see you, though. So let me start with let me start with we'll get going with the CRT stuff, because this is something that I know so many families have been concerned about, and I know that the press has been presenting this. I saw a piece that came out. It was a Politico piece talking about Georgia, and they were saying, "Oh, well, Georgia families, it's mostly white families that are criticizing this." And I was wondering, well, maybe that's Georgia, but in my town, it was a Cuban family, it was a black family, it was a Mexican family that led the fight on this. In my hometown, it's been black families leading the fight on this. I've seen all of these videos where, in Virginia, Fulton County, it's a Muslim Democrat mother that has been leading the charge in her area. And this really, really dangerous theology or theory that's masquerading as something that's academic and educational, it's institutionalizing differences. I worry, Lieutenant Governor, about what this is going to do to our kids that have to deal with this in school. This is abusive. Obviously you have a lot of concerns with it, but what is your big fear about how this is going to impact kids and what we as parents are going to be having to deal with 10 years down the road because of this abusiveness?
Well, my main concern is when you look at the United States of America, where we've come from in such a short time. And I say a short time relatively because you think about this fact. It wasn't too awful long ago in the grand scheme of world history that in this nation we had the institution of slavery. And in this short time, in this nation, we have managed to go from having a standard of having slavery being legal to ending that institution, then ending the institution of separate but equal, and bringing ourselves to a place of racial harmony that is not recognized that you cannot find in any other nation on earth. I don't care what anybody says. We worship together, we work together, we eat together, we play together. I mean, we have found ourselves on track to have racial harmony in this nation like never before and like never on earth any country has. And now we're trying to introduce a theory that will not take us forward, but take us backwards, and will not bring us together, but drive us apart. It is absolute insanity. And everybody out there who is not buying into this neo-Marxism, this socialist dogma, can see through it, and they are absolutely angry because they know that this is going to be dangerous to our constitutional republic.
Yes, I amen to that. And Lieutenant Governor, when I look at some of the curriculum and some of the messaging that is used in this, and I think that parents were able to see a lot more of this because of the lockdown. If there's one thing that was positive that came out of that lockdown, is parents got an eyeful of what their kids were learning in these schools. I mean, maybe that was God's way of saying everybody just needs to chill out for a bit and look what's happening in your kids' schools, using that one positive. But teaching kids to view everything first through the lens of gender, ethnicity, race, religion, and that's what we have spent. I mean, I remember being a kid and being raised and not viewing people through that lens. Now it's like we are walking back so much progress, and educationally and intellectually walking things backwards and teaching kids to view things like this. How in the world did this ever get passed off as any kind of educational anything?
This is what happens. This is the dreadful effects of having turned over the education system to the left, sad to say. For far too many decades, we have turned our education system over to people who have PhDs and people who say they have our children's best interest at heart, when they do not have our children's best interest at heart. What they have at heart is pushing an agenda that they believe in. In this case, the agenda happens to be dividing us for the purposes of creating more class, more race, more sexual identity division, to reformulate minds and shift them into these socialist boxes. And again, when you look at what is taught through critical race theory, it harkens back to the days of when white supremacists taught things like, if you just have one drop of blood inside of you, you're a black person. That black people's skulls are shaped differently. That's what makes them less intelligent. It is the same premise turned upside down on its head and turned backwards. It is bigotry at its finest. We cannot tolerate it. We will not tolerate it. And parents, teachers, and students, and everybody in this nation needs to stand up and not be afraid to push back on it. The same way we weren't afraid to push back on it when the Klan and other hate groups were pushing racist ideologies like this. This is the United States of America, and we're not going to tolerate it.
Amen to that. You were speaking, you were talking about socialism and the socialist policies of this administration. I wanted to share with everybody watching. I think it was probably one of my favorite quotes that you've ever said. One of my favorite things that you've ever said in one of your speeches. And this, for folks who didn't know, this is when the Lieutenant Governor was given that speech at the GOP state convention, and you were talking about socialism, and you brought up the example of 9/11 and how during 9/11 there were people who were running into those buildings to help people. And you said, quote, "That's got to be us on this day right here. We've got to run to the trouble." And then you added, "You do not share your heritage with weak and ineffective people who cower at the sign of trouble." I love that. Talk to me about that. I love that quote, and that's really what we should be focusing on. That's what we all share.
That's exactly right. And just like I just mentioned, in times of trouble in this nation, when the Klan raised its head during the Civil Rights Movement and tried to beat and bomb people and intimidate people, we had great people in this state, in our nation, in our states, that did not lay down. They saw the trouble. They saw the potential to lose friends. They saw the potential to lose jobs. They even saw the potential to lose their lives. but it did not stop them. They ran headlong against those folks and defeated those ideologies. It is time for us to do the same thing with these socialists. We see the trouble is coming. We see ourselves being demonized in the media. We see ourselves being demonized on our jobs, maybe even losing our jobs. But we can't be afraid of that. We need to be courageous, just like those folks that fought against those racist ideologies. We need to fight against these today, and we need to use their example to do that.
Yeah, we're definitely going to need that unity, and we're definitely going to need to be able to rely on each other. One last quick question for you, talking with Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. If everybody's looking at the economy, they're looking at inflation, they're looking at all this incredibly troubling stuff, whether it's in Texas, whether it's in North Carolina. How do you see this? Because I keep hearing that things are going to subside by the fall, that maybe by the fall things are going to be a little bit better, especially now that states are reopening and people are getting back to work, getting back to school. What are I'm very curious, because you're such an optimistic individual, and you have a lot of really great, whether it's inspirational or really just good advice in general. What is your thought about everything that's happening? What do you tell your constituents when they say, Lieutenant Governor, we're worried about the price of used cars, even we're worried about the price of lumber? What are you telling people, and how are you navigating this very uncertain time?
Well, what I'm telling folks is this. I'm telling them right here in the state of North Carolina to look at the state of North Carolina. Before 2010, North Carolina economically was stagnant. We were not moving. Teachers hadn't had a pay raise in 6 years. Our economy was lagging behind. But once conservatives took control of this state, once conservative principles start to win out in this state, we saw a complete turnaround. And now North Carolina is on firm financial footing. We're one of the top business destinations in the country. We have a tax code that is the absolute gold standard of this country. It's setting the example for other states. And so what I tell folks is this: if you want to win in your home, in your community, in your state, and in your nation, we have got to embrace conservative principles over leftist ideas. And we've got to make sure that we put people in office who are pushing those conservative principles. Because I like to say it like this: conservative principles, this is proven, conservative principles build states and nations. Liberal ideas tear those things down. So we got to make sure that we push those conservative principles and we put people in office who do the same.
Amen to that, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. I love calling you that. It's so good to talk with you again, and I would love to talk to you anytime. You're one of our favorites out there, so keep up the fight. We appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Of course. Good to talk with you. All right, folks, up next, the hypocrisy of socialism and socialists continues to be exposed. We'll discuss that next. Stay with us. Well, there's a candidate for New York mayor, and she's a woman of the people, a socialist who believes in equity and is endorsed by another salt-of-the-earth socialist, the Tesla-driving AOC. Now, who is this mayoral candidate, you ask? It is Maya Wiley, and she cares about New York and the black community, so much so that she wants to defund the police by slashing $1 billion from NYPD's budget. Now, you might say, won't that get New Yorkers killed? I mean, after all, if you were a criminal and you knew that there would be fewer police officers on the street, wouldn't you be inclined to commit more crime? Well, you better check your privilege and your whiteness, because you're being logical and you must stop that. Because logic will make it impossible to understand what I'm about to tell you next about New York mayoral candidate Maya Wiley. See, when Ms. Wiley isn't campaigning as a socialist who believes in equity for all, she's living in her $2.7 million home. And when she walks out of that $2.7 million home on the best street in Brooklyn, on the way to campaigning for defunding the police, she has her own personal security detail at the cost of $550 a month. I know, right? Most New Yorkers and members of the black community don't have security details, but that is their problem, not hers. Equity in policing is not going to be achieved overnight, guys. I mean, so if more people die because she defunds the police, at least they'll die equitably? So now, Ms. Wiley also believes so much in equity that she thinks classes for talented students should be eliminated. Equal outcomes for all, correct? Sure. For you, for Ms. Wiley, well, she sent one of her daughters to a $50,000 a year private school. Are you sensing a theme here? Because see, the people who talk about socialism and equity, people like mayoral candidate Maya Wiley, they're talking about equity for you, not for them. They are your betters, after all. Equity is for the people and communities that they exploit to gain power. And if you didn't know that, then you're as foolish as Maya Wiley thinks you are. This is the scam that all socialists use to assume power. Socialist Bernie Sanders owns 3 homes, and one of them is on a lake. That commoner, Elizabeth Warren, she's worth about $12 million, and she thinks Elon Musk has too much money. But you won't be surprised at all to learn that Ms. Warren thinks that she has just about the right amount. And what about the former president and first lady, the Obamas, right? I mean, the community organizers who care deeply about everyday Americans, particularly Black Americans, but they don't see many of, I don't know, what they are Martha's Vineyard. They don't get down and see what the people need anymore. They live in a $12 million waterfront estate. Schools in Martha's Vineyard are 86% white. You get the idea. Maya Wiley isn't an anomaly. She's par for the socialist course. Defund the police for you, private fancy security for her. Government housing for you, a $2.7 million home for her. Failing schools for your kids, private schools for hers. See, the Democrat Party, this is a socialist Marxist. They're all the same thing. It's just a stepping stone to tyranny. Always, though, ever, their intent is to rule over you. Equity for thee, but not for me. Just ask Maya Wiley. That does it for us tonight. Thank you for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.